It's a Tuesday morning. You're running late. You grab your bag, your keys, your coffee, and you say out loud to the dog, "Okay, I'll be back later." You don't know why you do this. It isn't rational. The dog doesn't speak English. It cannot process the word later. And yet something in you insists on the goodbye. Something in you needs the dog to know. Your dog watches you walk to the door. It tracks the movement of your hands with its eyes. It looks at the bag. It looks at your face. It looks at the bag again. And in that moment, without a single word, without a single shared language, something passes between you. Here is what most people assume that thing is: love in the soft, general sense. Loyalty, the uncomplicated, wordless devotion of a simple animal. But what the science actually shows is something stranger, something older, something that should make you stop and rethink almost every moment you've ever shared with that dog, starting with the way it looked at your bag this morning. Your dog doesn't see you the way you think it does. It doesn't even see you as human. And what it sees instead is, honestly, far more interesting. When people try to explain the intensity of the bond between a dog and its owner, two explanations tend to dominate. The first is the simplest: conditioning. Your dog loves you because you feed it. You are the food source, the treat dispenser, the source of all good things. This is Pavlov's shadow. The idea that what looks like love is really just a very sophisticated association between your face and a full bowl. The second explanation is slightly warmer. Dogs are pack animals, and you've become the pack. You are the alpha, or in more modern terms, the attachment figure. The dog stays close because that's what social animals do. It's evolutionary programming dressed up as affection. Both of these explanations have something true inside them. They're not wrong exactly. But researchers who spent years looking at exactly how dogs process the presence of a human, not just any human, but you specifically, found something that neither of those explanations can account for. Something that makes the relationship between a dog and its owner far more precise, far more cognitively sophisticated, and far more mutual than either story suggests. There's a study from 2009 that set the stage for all of it. We'll get to what they found in a moment. But first you need to understand what makes your dog's relationship with you categorically different from its relationship with every other living thing on the planet. In 2009, researcher Juliane Kaminski and her team at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany, published a study in the journal Science that had been quietly reshaping how animal cognition scientists thought about the domestic dog. The study involved 84 dogs and a deceptively simple setup. The researchers hid food in two locations. In one condition, a human was present and watching when the food was hidden. In another, the human was present but had their eyes closed, or their back turned, or was looking away. The question was whether the dogs would modify their food-seeking behavior based on whether the human knew where the food was. This is called theory of mind research, the study of whether an animal can model what another individual knows, believes, or intends. For a long time, it was assumed only humans and a handful of great apes could do it. What Kaminski found was that the dogs consistently and reliably adjusted their behavior based on whether the human could see. When the human's eyes were open and attentive, the dogs were far more likely to approach forbidden food cautiously or not at all. When the human's back was turned, they went for it. They weren't just responding to the presence of a human body. They were tracking human attention, modeling what the human knew. Think about what that means. Your dog doesn't simply see you as a body in the room. It sees you as a mind in the room. It's reading your attention like a map, tracking what you're aware of, what you can see, what you know. The look it gave your bag this morning before you left? That wasn't distress. That was reading. Your dog was tracking the cues that indicate your attentional state. It was building a model of what you were about to do, based on what you seem to be focused on. It doesn't see you as human. It sees you as a knower, a being with a perspective that shifts and can be tracked. And that's only the first layer. Now take this one step further, because in 2016, a team of researchers at Lorand University in Budapest, led by Attila Andix, published a study in the journal Science that gave us something we had never had before: a window into the dog brain, running in real time, while the dog listened to the human voice. They trained 13 dogs to lie still inside an fMRI brain scanner while listening to recordings of speech. The recordings varied across two dimensions: whether the word itself was meaningful, praise words versus neutral words, and whether the intonation was positive, warm, rising, encouraging, or flat. The research design was elegant. It let them separate content from tone in a way no behavioral study could. What they found was that dogs process the two dimensions in two completely different brain regions, using a hemispheric split nearly identical to how humans do it. The right hemisphere processed emotional tone. The left hemisphere processed the meaning of the word itself. And crucially, the reward center of the brain only activated fully when both matched. When a praise word was delivered in a praise tone, your dog isn't just hearing the music of your voice and ignoring the words. It is processing both, in parallel, and comparing them against each other. It knows the difference between good boy said warmly and good boy said flatly. It knows when the sound matches the feeling. It knows, in other words, when you mean it. This is not the processing architecture of an animal that sees you as a food source. Food sources don't require emotional coherence monitoring. This is the architecture of a social being calibrated to track the full communicative depth of you, your tone, your words, and whether they align. Here's where it gets genuinely strange, though. And this is the part that changes how you understand the evolutionary story entirely. In 2015, Friedrich Range and Zofia Varani at the University of Vienna's Wolf Science Center published a comparative study in PLOS 1. They ran parallel socialization and problem-solving trials on dogs and wolves raised under identical conditions. Hand-reared from birth, socialized with humans for the same duration, given the same amount of human contact. The purpose was to isolate the effects of domestication from the effects of upbringing. If dogs are simply better at reading humans because they're raised around them, then identically socialized wolves should perform comparably. They didn't. In tasks designed to measure human-directed communication, following pointing gestures, reading social cues, using human gaze as a source of information, dogs showed abilities that wolves, despite equivalent socialization, simply did not match. The difference wasn't training. It wasn't exposure. It was structural. It was in the dog. Over roughly 15,000 years of domestication, something happened at a genetic and neurological level that rewired the dog's social processing to be specifically, differentially attuned to humans. Your dog's ability to read you isn't a learned behavior, it's a built-in feature. An evolutionary inheritance, selected for over thousands of generations because dogs that could read human attention survived and reproduced, and dogs that couldn't tended not to. You are not someone your dog learned to understand. You are the species its brain was shaped to read. Think about what your dog did the last time you were upset. Not crying, not yelling, just quiet in a way that was slightly different from normal quiet. Did it come closer? Did it sit near you without being asked? There's a study from 2009 from Marta Gaxi and colleagues at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, published in Animal Cognition, that measured dogs' responses to subtle emotional cues from humans, specifically tracking whether dogs could distinguish the attentional quality of a distressed human from a calm one. They found that dogs were significantly more likely to orient toward, approach, and maintain proximity to a human exhibiting distress-associated cues, even when those cues were not dramatic. Even when they were quiet. Your dog came to you when you were quiet sad not because it was trained to. It came because it was reading you. And reading you, for your dog, is something it was born knowing how to do. Here's the part most dog owners get wrong, and it produces real confusion and sometimes unnecessary worry. Because your dog is reading you constantly, and because its brain is wired to treat you as a primary social reference point, it picks up on your emotional state with a sensitivity that can look, from the outside, like anxiety, like fragility, like a dog that can't cope without you. But there's a critical distinction between a dog that is socially bonded to you and a dog that is experiencing clinical separation distress. And conflating the two leads owners to either misidentify normal behavior as pathology or miss genuine distress because they've normalized it. In 2010, Monique Udall and her team at the University of Florida published a study in the journal Learning and Behavior that looked at how dogs and wolves used human social cues in problem-solving tasks, specifically gaze direction and pointing, and found that dogs demonstrated what the researchers called a human-focused attentional strategy. Dogs didn't just use human cues when available. They defaulted to looking at the human before attempting to solve a problem themselves. They checked in. That checking in behavior, the look toward your face before the dog commits to an action, is normal. It's not insecurity. It is the very attentional architecture that makes dogs useful partners to humans. A dog that checks your face before crossing a street, before greeting a stranger, before deciding whether to eat something unfamiliar, is doing exactly what its cognition was designed to do. What separation distress actually looks like is different in quality and scale. Destructive behavior that begins within the first 30 minutes of departure. Vocalization that escalates rather than settles. Elimination in a house-trained dog. Weight loss. Self-directed behaviors like repetitive licking or pacing on a fixed route. If your dog watches the door for the first hour after you leave and then goes to sleep, that is bonding. That is the reading animal waiting for more information to read. If your dog dismantles the kitchen for the 5th week in a row, that is something that warrants a conversation with a veterinary behaviorist. Not because your bond is wrong, but because the calibration of the stress response has become dysregulated, and there are evidence-based interventions that help. The distinction matters because misidentifying bonding as distress can lead owners to inadvertently reinforce anxiety through excessive reassurance rituals. And misidentifying distress as bonding can mean a suffering animal doesn't get what it needs. Let's come back to the bag. Your dog saw you pick it up. It tracked your attention as you gathered your things. It looked at your face one more time before you reached the door. Here's what was actually happening in that moment, laid bare by everything we've been through. Your dog was running the most sophisticated social analysis its brain knows how to run. It was modeling your attention, reading your emotional tone, cross-referencing your behavior against a detailed internal representation of everything you've done before. It was consulting its most trusted source of information about what the world is about to require of it. That source is you. Not you as a food dispenser. Not you as an alpha. You as a knower. You as a reliable emotional signal. You as the being whose attentional state provides the most accurate map of what matters in the environment. There's a word for this in the research literature. Scientists call it social referencing. It's the same term used for the behavior of human infants who, in an unfamiliar situation, look at their caregiver's face before deciding how to respond. The infant looks at the parent. The parent's expression tells it whether the situation is safe or threatening. The infant uses the parent as an interpretive anchor for reality. Your dog does this with you. Every time it looks at your face before deciding whether to approach something new. Every time it settles when your voice settles. Every time it mirrors your stillness with its own. It is not using you as a provider. It is using you as a lens. And here is the thing that lands differently once you understand it. Your dog doesn't need to know you're human. It doesn't need to understand your job, your age, your history, your language, your fears. It has built something more fundamental than any of that. It has built a model of you, specific, calibrated, updated every single day. And it trusts that model more than it trusts almost any other information source available to it. You left this morning and you said, "I'll be back later," to an animal that doesn't speak English. But it wasn't meaningless. It heard the tone. It processed the intonation. It compared the feeling of those sounds to the feeling it knows from every other morning you have done exactly this and returned. And some part of its brain, the part shaped across thousands of years to make this calculation precisely, concluded, known pattern. Safe departure. Wait. It knows you. Not what you are. Who you are. And it has been paying closer attention than you realized. Your dog doesn't see you as human. It sees you as the most legible, most trusted, most carefully studied thing in its world. A being whose attention, tone, and behavior it has mapped with a precision that took evolution thousands of years to build. If that changed something about the way you'll look at your dog today, consider subscribing. Every video here is an attempt to do exactly this. Take a behavior you've always noticed but never had language for, and hand you the science behind it. And I want to hear from you. Does your dog check your face before it makes a decision? That glance toward you before it greets a stranger, or steps off the curb, or walks into a new room? Drop it in the comments. Because that small thing has a name, and what it means is exactly what this whole video has been about. Next time, we're looking at something that seems even simpler on the surface. The way your dog chooses where to sleep. The answer involves a sensory system, so precise it changes what closeness even means to a dog. You won't think about it the same way after.